some housekeeping, I guess, with respect to the webinar. If you have questions, there's a button down here where you can do the raise hand thing. So you can ask questions or post questions. So at the end, I can answer those. Or I guess mid-stride, I might could answer them too, but I doubt it once I get moving here. But I'll do my best. So this is who I am. So I'll be walking you through network discovery and polling. I've got kind of two things to talk about. I got this wonderful slide presentation, which I won't spend much time on because I don't, you can see I can't even get it in full screen mode here as far as my PowerPoint, so it tells you how much I know about PowerPoint. So we do a poll, talk a slide, do a poll, and then we'll do the actual demo and talk about our product, netTerrain, and discovery and what that all kind of means, and see if there's a fit there maybe for you guys or not. But let's see here. Moving forward, I think there's a polling question. Let me see if I can find it. Polls. Here we go. Poll. Launch poll. How do you document your network today? We got choices of Visio, spreadsheets, everything's in my brain, network monitoring tool, and no documentation. So you guys take a minute. Take a minute to review that. So a lot of monitoring tools. It looks like that's the winner. Got some Visio, spreadsheets, everything's in my brain. Those are not high priorities here. And then no documentation. Oh, there's an everything's in my brain. That's my favorite. Monitoring tools. Yeah, everybody's got monitoring tools, right? Visio. So that's the big winner today. And everything in my brain. All right. So thanks for doing that. And then, so it looks like monitoring tools are winning. Let's see, I ended that one, so we can move on to, so that was the polling question. And this is what we're going to talk about. Discover the network, sort of setting up intervals, know what's up, down, get alerts, document and diagram devices and properties, etc. So, and I'll talk about what we mean by discovery. We have different discovery options. I mean, primarily SNMP, but we have other things you can kind of do as well with respect to our tool, netTerrain and the collector. So we have another polling question. Polls number 2. Poll number 2. Let me start this one up. Launch. And this one says, is saving time to document your network through automated network discovery something that is or will be important? So is this kind of your main impetus, is trying to save time perhaps? You need documentation, tired of sort of doing it by hand, would like to discover the network as best you can, and so on. So that's a big yes for most everybody. Couple no's. You must already have documentation, that's why. So, in polling on that. All right, well, thanks for participating in that. It's great. So we'll do some netTerrain in action now, and then we'll get to, of course, the Q&A. So netTerrain in action. So I'm going to speak to netTerrain from the standpoint of, again, discovering the network. Right? We're a network documentation tool primarily. That's what netTerrain is about. Inside plant, outside plant. Logical, physical drawings, whatever it is you kind of want to do. If you haven't seen netTerrain, it's a collection of objects. You just basically drag and drop things, and then you can create connections between things and kind of go from there. You can build a whole hierarchy, buildings, rooms, floors. Outside plant, manholes, show conduits and ducts, and et cetera. But, one of the things people like to do, if they can, is do some sort of discovery where possible. So I want to discover my network. I know the IP address range. Now, with respect to discovery, one thing we offer is this thing called the collector, and our collector is used to do that, SNMP type discovery. And it can interface with other tools as well. I'll bring up the collector here so you can kind of see what it looks like. So the collector is a standalone tool. It installs on a Windows machine, so Windows, I run it on my laptop here. You put it on a server, of course, or run it from other systems, depending on how you need to do your discovery. If you're walking around doing a discovery, and then you want to push data back, or if you want to have these things, sort of the collector set up to do discovery and then push data back. And when I say push data back, the way it effectively works is this collector interacts or interfaces with a server. In this case, are the netTerrain server. So the netTerrain server, in my case, I'm using my my netTerrain cloud account. I've got my personal email address and a password set up, so I can take data that I discover here and effectively push it into my netTerrain cloud instance. And right now, this is empty. There's nothing in here, so I can hopefully show you kind of how that works, that interaction. So I have a small network. I use a product called Mimic, and it allows me to set up SNMP type devices where I can discover them and they have connections and so on. So I'll be doing a discovery against that, and I also have a device in-house that I'll discover as well and show you that and maybe take it down so you can see sort of the settings of status and so on. But back to the collector, how's it work? All right, so we have these pre-built what we call connectors, and connectors are interfaces to data or data sets. So for instance, if I want to interact with something like ServiceNow or SolarWinds, I would configure it. So I go to the configuration, user password, and API, and put that in and test it, and then I can start pulling data from that system. The data is predefined based on their APIs. We set it up based on feedback and interactions and things we've had over the years with customers of the data they are looking for, and we build that connector to that. Because most of these connectors are pulling data via APIs, it's usually easy to add more data that these systems get, because there's usually an API call for it. So, if something was happened to be missing from SolarWinds or ServiceNow and you needed that data, you talk to us and we go in there and modify the connector and push it out. So it's not very hard. Now, in the case of SNMP, it's a little different, right? You're not interacting with an API and you're not pulling data from some system that's already collecting data. You're actually pinging or hitting a device via SNMP and pulling that data back to use it in some manner, right? Discover. So it might be discover the network and understand what's out there, discover the network and just see if things are responding to my SNMP and so on, right? So how do we configure or set this up? Well, there's a button over here for configure, and I press that button, and then it gives me a list of IP addresses, in this case, ones, of course, that I entered. So if I want to enter more IPs, I would go down here and click inside the box, type in an IP address, choose a version of SNMP, and then configure the credentials and community strings data for that IP address range or ranges. You can put in multiple community strings if you want to. So if that range of IPs has all different community strings, that's fine. You just throw them in there and just kind of iterates through them all. And so on. There's a more button. I don't even remember what's in here. Oh, I guess you can change the UDP port if you want to. So that's from the standpoint of SNMP, that's basically what you're doing. You go in there and configure that. It's pretty straightforward. I think it's a matter of finding the button, so to speak, to press. Now, this collector I mentioned, it could kind of run from sort of anywhere. How do I get the collector? Well, there's a couple ways you can get it through the netTerrain GUI. You can actually go in and I think it's under tutorial, discover the network. I think that takes you down to the download of the collector, which is built into the GUI that you have here. You can also go into the admin console. And the reason I'm saying these things is because if you decide you want to kind of test things out, you can. You can go to netTerrain.com and sign up, and there's a button here for download collector, and you would be able to download that. The collector in here might be a little bit different version, a little bit older, in fact. I'm using kind of the latest and greatest just because I usually get it off from the engineering part of our dev because I do some testing there. However, it should effectively function the same. The look might be just a little different, but that's how it works. So you got your collector, you download it, you install it, put in your IP address range. If you do an SNMP, I mean, you could test it with some of the other interactions, SolarWinds or AWS or, that kind of thing if you want to pull data and then try pushing that data through. So once you do set up your configuration, you decide, hey, what connector you're going to use, enable it, because you can inactivate if you want to. You can activate or inactivate a connector in case you're doing a discovery, but you don't need to do it for everyone or don't want to. And then from there, there's a button up here called Scan. So you'd hit Scan, and it does just that. It starts to iterate through the IP address ranges, applying the community strings, and then it starts to do its thing as far as discovery. And you'll see it kind of gives you a pretty verbose log of kind of what it's doing, what it's reading, what it's trying to get information-wise, and so on. If you get tired of watching that, you can press the little matrix button over here and watch the matrix if you want. Or we can switch back. So starts to iterate through. This takes a few minutes here. It's not a huge range, but still got to go through the process. And once it does its discovery, then you'll see starts to get the details, how many devices it's discovered, how many connections it's discovered, and kind of go from there. So it finished. It wasn't too terribly long. I could clear this out if I don't want to see this screen anymore, kind of wipe it out. If I go up to the top, I can start to see basically what was discovered in those different ranges. Right now, they're listed as online, which they should be listed as online. And I can click around and kind of see the devices. I can double-click and kind of get information about the device itself and get a full sort of range of data about the device, whatever it happens to be. Now, we pull certain data from the devices, certain standard SNMP things like status, name, IP range, of course, object ID, system description. You can read this stuff at the top. Now, that doesn't mean that's all you can get from these devices. Like, you might have a device that will give you power readings or temperature readings or whatever. If there's an SNMP value there, you can typically add it to the system, the OID information, and we will discover that piece of data for you as well. That's kind of, sort of next step after you learn a bit about the collector and start doing discovery and pushing data and sort of understand all that, then you can start to add the other things in. It's not hard to add them in. You need to know something about netTerrain. For instance, our catalog and how it works and how you set up these extra OIDs and things like that. Again, not hard, but they're, you got to know which buttons to press, right? So once this is all discovered, I go over here and I look, there's still nothing in here. Well, you do have to do a push. You have to say, okay, well, let's push the data out to the server. So I press the button, and then it takes the data discovered and sends it over to the netTerrain server, and should, start doing its thing and push the data in, and et cetera. So, and it'll kind of tell you, I don't know what the link type was, or I don't know what this node type was, or whatever. That's fine. Those are things you work through. It might be because you need an object added to the catalog. You might need to look up an object in the catalog based on the system object ID that was discovered, and so on. It's all straightforward stuff once you know a little bit about the tool and how everything works. So it's not hard. And I'll show you kind of the different device types, why we see like device type was not found type of thing. So you'll see progress, where we know sort of what's happening. You could switch over. This is done now. There's a link down here you can click on. If I go over here, it says, there, I got something in here. It says it's called networks. I can move this around if I want to. So if I double click on that, let's see if there's any data in here. Okay. So there's some data. It's processing. It's applying some energy. You could wait for this to finish. I'm impatient. I'm just going to say apply this. And what it's doing is just trying to spread these things out in some manner. The reason there might be connections is because there's connections between these different networks. This one's unto itself. It's a 10 network. That's a standalone object I happen to have sitting on my network. But if I go look at some of these segments, double click, and these all correspond. It's going to apply energy again, right? So that all corresponds to what it's discovering over here, right? The different network segments. So over here, let's apply this, and it sort of spreads things out. And you're like, well, these are just generic objects where this one's kind of an actual object. That's where we get into the object IDs. The system couldn't identify this object ID with respect to the catalog, so it goes, I'm not sure what this is supposed to be. So you might have to go look that one up. I might not even have this Aruba AP225 in my system. I don't know. I'm going to go find out. So give me a second. I'm going to jump over to my catalog here. Devices. So we got lots of devices. Aruba. Oh, my internet connection today is a little bit weak for some reason. Well, I know why, but I won't mention company names. So that was a Aruba 225. I don't see an Aruba 225. Oh no, there's some other access points in here. I don't think I have that specific 225 access point, but that's okay. I'm gonna make it a 135 just in case, so you guys see how it works. So I click that. Now I can go back and sort of re-push. You can set this up where it pushes automatically, by the way. I'm just doing this for, the sake of sort of seeing how some of the inner things work here. But so you do a discovery, it discovers stuff. If you want it to be very specific to the catalog object, you can go in and actually look up an object and apply it. If you don't have the device type, if you're a customer, you can request them from us. You can create them yourself in our catalog. We don't keep you from effectively doing that. But you'll notice now I got an AP225, which is really a 135, but I'm just using this as an example. So very easy to switch out object types. You'll see all the data that I'm collecting, data information. Again, I could add more things to discover from this if there's other data points that I want to grab. All right. So that's what we try and do. We try and make it easy for you to go out, do some sort of discovery, pull back data, and have it interact, build connections and links between these objects. If there's connections between links, like over here, this is a reference object, so this is telling me this switch is connected to this core. If I double click on that particular router, it's going to jump me over to that network segment. I'll just hit apply, and you can start to see how things are basically all connected or linked together. So here's some other ones. I can double click, it'll probably take me to a different segment or take me back where I was. Now, these objects, once you do discovery, you can take the objects and either what we call alias them, so we can, let's say, copy something and then alias it. And the reason you might do something like an alias is because you want to show this maybe in a cabinet. So maybe I want to kick this device. Oh, no, I don't want to delete it. No. So maybe I'm going to take this device and I'm actually going to put it into some hierarchy. I'm going to build my buildings and floors and rooms and all this other stuff, right? So for instance, I'll go grab a building, I'll double click on it, and I'll grab something like a floor, I'll bring that in, right? And then I might bring in a room. Normally I'd put, obviously I don't have any rooms, so that's okay. I'll just go straight to a cabinet, and we'll grab I like the IBM cabinets usually. Let's try one of these 36U cabinets. So paste this, and so then I can rack mount that. So now I've got the device in two locations, in a logical and a physical now. I could also just take everything I discover and just throw it into cabinets or throw it into some other logical drawing. That's totally up to you. I can always get back to the master object, which in this case is this guy. Right? So discovery is great. Build things out, and then you can take the stuff you discover and start to use it in other drawings, either physical or logical or both, if you're trying to do that. So, as far as you go through this discovery process, and one of the things you can do is the status. So, for instance, I have an object up here. I can set this up where I can start to poll the objects that I've discovered. So it's going to go down through and poll, and it's going to keep an eye on the status specifically. In this case, every 10 seconds or so, depending on latency and where things are. But so the status of this online says it's online. If I go over here to the device itself, that's the device. I'll make this a little bigger. So I'm polling this. Status is online. Let me see if I can change this and see if we can get it to go offline. I'm going to walk away for a second. I got to go unplug it from the switch. All right. So I unplugged it. Let's see if we get a change in state here. It's very nerve-wracking because I don't know if it's going to do it. And if it doesn't do it, what do I do? Let's see here. So let me go back. So it's changing. Still doing its checks. I'm just going to click around to see if everything is working here. Oh, well, I'll check and see. I might have to change my VPN. I did get on my VPN here, so it may not be doing its thing. But we'll give it another second here. Let me get off my VPN here. Give me a second. Unable to read. That's fine. Polling. Okay, so it went offline. So now it says offline. And then if we go back to this guy, let's see if the status got pushed. No. So it hasn't switched yet to offline. But normally it would switch over to offline. I don't know if I screwed things up because of my VPN, but normally this would switch to an offline state. And then it'll do something like flash or, say, hey, that's a visual override, so you basically set that up on what's going to happen when the state changes from, online to offline. So that's your call of what's going to happen. Those are just extras that you can set up. You can set it up to do an email notification, change state, ring the parents, so it would flash at a higher level. So this thing would flash and all the way up to the top level. It can, blink. I shouldn't say flash. I should say blink and so on. So with that, I'm almost out of time. I'm going to take some questions. And you guys, I mentioned you could try things out. So if you go to, not server, but if you go to netTerrain.com, and I'm going to log out just so you can see what you would normally go through. So I'm going to say log out. Okay. All right. You basically put your email address, say start my free trial, and that's pretty much it. And then, as I mentioned, if you are trying things out, you do need to download the collector, which if you go in the admin console, it's probably the easiest way to get to it. You scroll down, there's a button that says download, or you come over here and you press, I think, tutorial, discover network, and that will take you to the download collector directly. And then after that, set up an IP address and start discovering data. And if you want to push the data, just make sure your netTerrain server is set up to your account, which it should be by default, but it won't have the password in there. You'll have to put that in. But yeah, that's it. So I hope this was helpful. Let's stop my share, see if there's any questions, and kind of go from there. Is it possible to integrate with an HP IMC and Rapid7? I don't know what those are. Integrations for us really come down to the tool and whether they have APIs. And when I say APIs, they have some, usually a REST API available for us to interact with and pull data from. If they do, typically we can do some sort of integration with it through our collector. But we'd have to do some investigation, so we do need some more details. Just let us know. Can you define your own SMP strings, or are they predefined? Yes, you can. That's where you put in the OID information. into the catalog itself for the field that you want to grab, the data. So it's not hard to do. It's one of those things that I would ask to have a quick call, 10-minute call with me, Fred, whoever, and we'll walk you through how you set that up. But again, it's not hard. And unfortunately, I don't have a user manual for the collector. We actually redid the collector this past go around with version 8.5. So I have a whole new manual being developed, and it should be out soon, a couple weeks, as far as the manual goes. So we will have that available. But in the meantime, call us. We'll set up a call with you, spend some time with you talking about it. It's not the sales call stuff. It's just tech, just me pressing buttons and answering questions and determine if this thing's ain't good for you. How long does it take to discover 15,000 devices? I have no idea. You'd have to put it on your network and see. It takes me, locally, or let's assume it's a second or 2 seconds per device, kind of do for the math from there. But the other thing, too, 15,000, I don't think you're going to do that from maybe one collector. That sounds like something maybe you put them around in different locations. Remember, not remember, but just so you know, the collector is netTerrain API based. So what that means is when we push data, we use our own netTerrain APIs to push the data through to the server. So that's all REST, which means the collector can be anywhere as long as it has internet access to the server, not internet, but a connection to the server via HTTPS or HTTP, depending on how you want to configure it. So, that could be an internal server or an external, but the collector would have to push data. Now, with that said, you can actually save data that you discover with the collector, save it, and then load it some other place, another collector, and then push it. So you don't have to necessarily push it from the collector you discovered it from. So you can move data around and then load it up and then push it. So yeah, if you find out how long it takes you to discover 15,000, let me know. I'm happy to do a test with you too. If you want to start setting something up. How is netTerrain priced? I'll get back to that. Can you pull custom MIBs? Yeah. So the MIB, again, the data, as long as it's not proprietary. If when you say custom, that could be anything as long as it's open pretty much and available through a regular GET. But if it's proprietary, like they require all kinds of crazy passwords or their own software to read something, yeah, you can probably forget about that. I don't think we could do anything for you. It's always worth a test. It's easy to try things out. And netTerrain pricing, that has to do with really the objects. So, for instance, if you're doing discovery and you discover 100 objects, 125 switches, 25 routers, whatever, that's 100 devices or objects for us. And then if you have a couple buildings and rooms and floors, that's a few more objects, and then that's your license count. What we do not license based on the number of connections, so links we don't license for. We don't care about ports. We don't care about subcomponents, cards, etc. They don't count in our license count. So it's really the objects. We usually say that you drag from the catalog. That's sort of your license count. So, and you can start very small. You want to try things out, you can do netTerrain.com. It's like $100 a month for 100 objects or something. You can use the collector. You can pretty much do everything in netTerrain.com for the most part. So if you really want to get your feet wet and make sure it's the right fit, or just have a call with us, we'll talk to you about what you're trying to do and figure it out. We want you to be happy and make sure it's the right product for you, not just sell you something. So if you got more questions, reach out to myself or support at graphicalnetworks.com or sales@graphicalnetworks.com, or call us and talk to Fred, or however you guys want to do it. So thanks for your time. Appreciate it. Stay in touch. Bye.